catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. When it rains, it pours. Water's up to my chin. Won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach it. Many men have failed. Well, if you wanna get to heaven, you gotta raise a little hell. And I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They say no to sleepless nights. Will you find me? Hope you find me. I'll be back home soon. When the sun rises, when the sun we're trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Smart Energy Summit 2021. I hope you had a nice break and are recharged, ready for this afternoon session. My name is Andres Pintobello. I'm the head of research and projects at smartEn, and I'm thrilled to introduce our next speaker. I'm now joined by Tencent's Chief Exploration Officer and Senior Executive Vice President, David Wallerstein. Besides being very busy finding the newest next-gen opportunity for Tencent, he's also the author of the Chinese bestseller, Re-architecting Earth, Artificial Intelligence for Fuel, Food, Energy, and Water, which I hope we will be able to read in English very soon. Welcome, David. How are you doing?
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
I hope I didn't miss anything from that short introduction. I don't think your camera is on, David.
Okay, let me press the right buttons here. Okay, here we go. Hey, hi.
There we go.
Working.
Hi, David.
Great.
Well, thanks a lot for joining us. So I wanted to talk to you today about your experience in empowering consumers. You jumped into Tencent at the very beginning, around 20 years ago, I think, when you had pretty much 40 employees. 20 years later, you're about 50,000 employees working on all kinds of different sectors linked to technology. Of course, we're in particular interested in the energy aspect. And as you know, the electricity sector is in general a quite closed affair across the world, a sector that behaves usually conservatively, certainly on the regulated side, understandably so, to guarantee electricity of supply, right? But with that dynamic, we might be missing out on transformational changes to leapfrog to the solutions that we need to address an increasing demand of electricity, and then also the climate crisis, of course. You have recently written the book, Re-architecting Earth, AI for Few. Can you tell us about what went into writing this book, how it relates to the energy sector transformation, and what are we missing out by not acting in a bolder fashion?
Thank you. Yes, I really appreciate the chance to talk about this. I can understand many people are probably new to the name Tencent and may not have a great appreciation for what we do as a company and even our the home market of China, what's happening there. I can just explain a little bit. I've been working with the company over 20 years, and Tencent has about 22 years of history. Founder-driven company, young people who we really got started building services like telecommunications, messaging, social networking, and then entertainment and gaming. And over the years, we've actually built more and more capability to address the needs of enterprises through cloud services, like Amazon has them, Google. We're a major operator of cloud services and payment infrastructure, financial services infrastructure, and with that comes more and more services that we provide for enterprises. So we're really kind of become a rather diversified technology company with very strong roots in the internet and networking technologies, and then software, really computer science. And what's happened with computer science in the past 5-10 years, and data as well, is that's really morphed into these new generations of technologies like artificial intelligence and so on and so forth. So that's kind of Tencent in a nutshell, just to introduce that. And about 7 years ago, having been with the company for a long time, I really started to change my own focus in the company. I'm called the Chief Exploration Officer now, as you've seen, and I just want to explain what that means, and then how does it relate to energy and some of these other areas. I really felt that as a company, as we grew and scaled, we had a unique opportunity to think about what are the greatest challenges on Earth and how can we address them with technology. Instead of being very reactive with how we develop technology or chasing the latest fad that comes out. Some of you may have heard of virtual reality, for example, augmented reality. Every day goes by where you're getting pulled in directions with fads. And that can be interesting and helpful, but I felt we had to really focus on what the planet needs. What do human beings need? And we really started to think more about the fundamental building blocks of civilization and the coming climate crisis. We're in the middle of it, and the challenges that we face around us. And the more we considered that, the more we felt really that humanity is facing challenges that ultimately relate to how we procure our food energy and water needs. We call that FEW, F-E-W, and that these three areas actually have quite an intricate relationship to each other. And when you start solving for one of those areas in intelligent ways, you're actually maybe solving for another area. Like a very simple example is thermoelectric power, a coal-fired plant. We all these days have been saying we want to get rid of coal-fired plants because they're pollutive and they put a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere. But many people don't think of the relationship to water as part of that. Thermoelectricity, whether it's nuclear or coal, is all water dependent. So if you go solar or wind, now you have a water-free method of continuous power generation. So you get more benefits than just CO2 and renewables and these other things. So we've been applying these frameworks, thinking about the challenges first, and then stepping back after we have a good understanding of the challenges and we're building our knowledge over time, and thinking about what are the technologies that we have that we're very familiar with as an internet company and knowing software and networking. How can we develop those technologies to contribute more to our global challenge here of addressing climate change and dealing with energy transitions? And what we have found is we're very intrigued with the potential to use optimization technologies, basically. You could call it artificial intelligence for short, but that's a bit misleading. Really, what we're thinking about is how can you use networking, data, and software and sensors, hardware that tells us the status of a process, the status of a network, to optimize how we're delivering the energy that we need through those processes at many points in that flow of energy, from the generation of it to the transmission to actually at the endpoints, when you actually ask for that energy to go into your washing machine or your car or whatever it may be. There's so many parts of this process that can benefit from the application of these kind of artificial intelligence driven applications. And we talk about that a lot in our book, which is doing quite well in China. It's been quite well received, and recently China's made some major announcements about making progress in these directions. So there's a good amount of passion, interest, new ideas coming out in these areas, which is quite exciting. Maybe I'll leave it at that, Andres. I know I've been talking for a while. Maybe you can bring it back and make sure I'm on the right track here.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely on track. Actually, I have been thinking, I found it very interesting. You were talking about optimization technologies, right? And there are concerns in some countries in Europe that certain electricity markets or certain technologies involved in electricity markets could fall victims of strategic biddings or gaming issues. And I was wondering, if you've had, from your experience, what kind of benefits can we expect both from using AI or these optimization technologies on a large scale and trial projects using it to avoid these kinds of positions of power in certain markets like electricity markets, or how can you take advantage of these artificial intelligence tools?
Yeah, well, I feel overall as a theme, there's always exceptions, of course, but I just feel we're at a very, very early stage of deploying these technologies. And it's a stage where we're really both discovering the potential benefits for these technologies and the potential risks that you mentioned. And I think it's very important as early as possible to really map out those risks and demonstrate the benefits. But there is something challenging with developing any technology in this area, any new solutions. And that is that it's a little bit like a dance. You need two to tango. It's not just that you have companies like us or other startups coming up, developing interesting ideas and they can prove that it works. You need access to a partner, an energy partner of some kind, to even explore what's possible. Because like with any product and any service, it goes through generations of optimization and development. The first iPhone looks very different from the iPhone today, 12, 13 years later from the release. It's a very different product. And the first iPhone didn't even have the App Store thing in it and all of that. And same with these generations of products. We're just at the early stages. But what I have found that has been very challenging globally is actually to get technologists an opportunity to work with power companies to explore the possibility in different ways. The power industry, as a newcomer to the space, we're provided an opportunity to have this kind of discussion, participate, because we think we have some special know-how with software or data or telecommunications and these kind of networking technologies. But historically, that maybe wasn't such an important area to think about. And I think the industry has evolved around the world to be rather closed, and for good reason. There's security issues, there's stability of the network and all that. But the negative with that is that now we're facing a time in history where the planet, humanity, needs to innovate quickly and test things and do that in a safe way. But we need to find more solutions to help our economies and these energy ecosystems make these dramatic transitions. So I think there's an overall issue I want to say, which is, if I can encourage anyone for today's talk today, is to really think about how can we find safe types of pilot projects and opportunities to innovate around these new technologies and learn from them, admitting that some things may not work so well and some things may work really well, and those things we need to foster and scale out. Now, just to give you an example of something that I have in mind, and just to answer the question a little bit more specifically, like what's an example of this? Something that comes to mind quite quickly is, for example, just charging electric vehicles. Right now, the status quo, I know this is the case in most everywhere in Europe I'm familiar with, and certainly in the US, when you want to charge your Tesla, you just plug it in, it starts charging, right? You don't get any information as a consumer regarding what the price of energy is at that time. What kind of information you get. It could be reflected in price or other methods to say that energy you're getting is basically coal-fired energy. If you had waited 3 hours, it might have been wind power, because the wind is going to be blowing quite high tonight, or the sun is going to be up during the day, but it's evening now, so you're not getting solar, you're getting coal-fired energy. And the issue is that there's a couple things here. One is that you want to give the electric vehicle owner, as an example of someone who owns a very energy-hungry device, you want to give them a chance to minimize their cost, pure and simply. You, second of all, want to give them a chance to, through some kind of mechanism, use the cleanest form of energy possible, use as much renewable energy as possible. Maybe the most elegant way to do that, in my view, is reflect it through price. The least carbon, the more carbon dense you are, the more expensive your energy is. The more renewable you are, the less expensive. And you can deal with taxation and policies and things like that. But that's the high level idea. Third of all, though, we all know we want to reduce those demand spikes, right? Say you've come home at the end of the day, you plug in your car. It doesn't need to start charging at 7 or 5, or you need it to be full at 8 in the morning. And intelligence can help you optimize at what point are you in the queue going to be recharging your EV. And what you get is this very hopefully low, flat line, instead of a big spike, everyone getting going. EVs are selling well. Tesla is going to sell more. There's going to be more and more, VW, everyone's going towards the EVs. We have to manage this just to manage the grid, but we can do it in a way that's entirely consistent with maximizing the use of renewable energy when we have those supply peaks, and overall reducing those demand peaks. And I think the intelligence and data and optimization software is going to play the main role in this ultimately. And it remains to be seen, who are the providers of it? Who are the service providers? Does Tesla do it? Are there third parties? Or is it the power company? There may be many answers to that, depending where we are in the world. But I think we need to have a mindset that we need to start developing more of these kinds of technologies and applications.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from what you've said, I mean, what stands out to me is that risk taking is necessary to kickstart these solutions, and that sometimes is something that we're missing, maybe on the more conservative side, right, on the system operations side of the electricity sector. So really good message for anybody in those sectors listening to us. It takes two to tango, and we need you to take a bit more risk. But this binds very well with the question that I had now regarding I mean, we see a general lack of urgency tackling these issues, the electrification and climate change, not because it's not identified as an important topic, but because sometimes the legislative processes, they're slow, as you know. There's many interests involved. Institutions think, or the impression is, that we will reach the desired targets by 2030 without implementing drastic changes today. So the question is, how do we scale up? What do we need to bring these pilot projects that you were talking about into full development and into the full development and commercial phase by 2030, or in the near future, as soon as possible?
Yes, I actually found when projects go forward, it's really due to leadership that wants to make progress. So it's actually not necessarily that difficult, but the first step is usually to get the power companies out of their inertia, the status quo type thinking, and becoming more comfortable with the idea of innovation, and seeing it as an opportunity to improve, to change the way they do things. But I think there's a real general lack of leadership for these issues. But the thing is, what I find very powerful when we're in these transition points, and we're doing it, all this is happening because we see these oncoming threats. And we're transitioning our economies and energy systems in real time. It's important to acknowledge the challenge first before having the answer. I think leadership around the world often wants to acknowledge a challenge when they feel like they have the answer or the policy. And I think right now, it's probably more advantageous to say, to go the other way, which is the most obvious way, the way that we're talking about it right now. But leaders around the world have to get, in Europe here, we have to get more comfortable with that, saying, our challenge is that we want to introduce meaningful new technologies in a safe way, in a way that maybe even enhances our resilience and our security of our networks, but leverages these fast to deploy, low cost methods that use software. Software is the fastest thing to deploy, guys. If you're gonna shut down a coal-fired plant and put something else up, there's environmental studies, there's investment, there's jobs, and that may need to happen, but software is something that can use existing infrastructure immediately, relatively immediately actually, and make it run better, maybe 5% better, 10% better, 20% better. It depends on the case. But this is the promise of software. But leaders can say, we want to see results, we want to find out what works, and you have to basically task people, give people responsibility to discover, and provide some budgets, I think. You can have these innovation budgets. A nation could say, for our country, we want to have some fast tendering activities where we say we want to actually learn about teams out there that feel they can solve this problem, or that can actually, companies out there that have a solution. And we have a method to relatively quickly deploy and test those technologies. Maybe there are these small budgets available, hundreds of thousands of euro type budgets available, where you can find a piloted environment. Maybe there's an environment on an island somewhere in a country, or a city that says, we would love to deploy this and give it a try. And you go from that small pilot with a little bit of budget to participating technologists, participating companies. And then when that goes well, you can scale it up a little bit bigger. You evaluate and you say what worked and what didn't work. But you can scale it up when it's going well, and when it's not going well, you can say, thank you very much. Didn't help us really, but when we learn, it's always helpful to learn, even when you know what failed. You learn from that, and that can generate new ideas for how to succeed. And meanwhile, you've supported a startup, probably a local startup, in the European ecosystem, with some help to get a little business and to learn about the power of their own solution. I think this is what's really needed, is being willing to start small and engage smaller companies, smaller teams, because these are all new technologies. You're not going to get huge companies that do this yet, because it's all new. They're only going to get big once they have a lot of customers. So you're going to have to assume that in some cases, these are younger teams, smaller teams, startups, varying degrees of experience. but have a good program for wanting to scale up. If you don't have the program, then do this in a very experimental way where you appoint a few people to work on it and you learn as you go along with some budget and some support. But I really do think it's possible, and like everything in life, it will evolve, it will get more complicated, more enriched, the more you actually make progress and you start along with these operations. I'm quite confident that this can work quite well here in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely, and I fully agree with that. We're seeing some very interesting pilot projects in Europe being developed, also in the context of Horizon 2020 funding program from the European Commission, of which smartEn is part of. But we're still missing this pushing it then into the full commercial phase, and that's hopefully the next step that we're able to conquer. Well, thank you, David. This has been very interesting. We now have some time for questions from the audience that will be coming in now. You can all send them through the Tame platform. I have one from myself, actually, that I was curious while we wait. From your experience, David, I mean, you're based in San Francisco, if I'm correct. You have very close ties to China, have worked also in Japan, and you know the European Union. What are the main differences that you see between these three actors when trying to implement projects that you have talked about? I mean, from the small to the scaling up.
Yeah, thank you. So, well, they're very different ecosystems. Let me actually reflect on Europe more and compare Europe with the others, since this is a European-centric event. I feel like what Europe does really well is, having dialogues like this, and very thoughtful dialogues. People are very open to these ideas and want to make progress. But I feel what's missing in the European context versus like a China or the US is that kind of execution gene. I feel like sometimes, like in some cases, I'm always surprised how fast China moves. I mean, that's no secret. If you look at how much China has developed over the past 20 or 30 years, infrastructure, bridges, tunnels, all of that. I mean, you can see with your naked eye how much China has transformed in the past couple of decades, and that becomes habitual. So you can have discussions about what you want to do next and things like that, but the dialogue is always very action oriented. And I even feel like releasing the recent book I released it in Chinese first in China, AI for AI for Food, Energy, and Water. The dialogue around that book that I have is always very action oriented. It's like, oh, we could do this, we could do this. It's kind of like, it becomes a habit. It becomes almost like, the normal state is to have dialogue, but it's reaching, it's pushing towards action. And I think that's also, US is a big diversified country, but when you think about Silicon Valley, there's this huge kind of like the ecosystem, and all the participants in the ecosystem are very primed to move fast. They know that time is money because you only get a certain amount of capital from a venture capitalist, and then you only have a few months, maybe a year to prove that you've made progress, and then you go out again. This is how everyone is operating. Even the larger companies are operating that way, and then you become public and you have more pressure. And there's good and bad to that, but the good is that these become very execution-driven cultures. I think between Silicon Valley and China, and I think with Europe, my own observation is that while the discussions are good and the intentions are good, and Europe is definitely a leader in these areas, it can be quite slow. And so I pose that as like a challenge to Europe to move faster in these areas that are deemed to be really the most important for Europe. When you think about fighting climate change and embracing a resilient environment and healthy, resilient societies, this is really core to European values. And I think when it's something so important, it's really worth it to do more, to try more, to experiment more, to have more budgets available that are very tangible, because I know there's these high-level budgets for climate in Europe. You read about them all the time, you hear about them all the time. But when I work with startups in Europe, I don't really hear that often about those budgets making its way to the startup. You know, a 500,000 euro project here or a €1 million project there. It seems like there's always these high-level initiatives, and I don't have a good sense for how it trickles down to the innovative communities here, the startup communities. And I guess I have a big assumption in my mind that these entrepreneurial companies, these startups, will be quite important. It could be professors as well, coming out of university and wanting to put a team together to do more. And you know, but how do you embrace more of the society to get involved and to play a role in this and try more things faster, more pilots? You know, I think that's really the theme. And Europe is doing interesting things, of course, but I would encourage that I think there's a lot more that could be done, especially to be more in line with the passions of people here to really make a huge impact. You know, when you think of climate, you think of Europe, right? So
yeah, no, absolutely. I fully second that. I mean, it's just what you're saying, that it has to become second nature. This risk taking and this in this execution style of thinking, of moving forward. I think we have time for one question from the audience. They ask me, or they ask you rather, from a consumer's perspective, energy is a very fragmented and it's very difficult to understand. There are lots of individual part solutions like solar, electric vehicles, smart meters, etc. There are part solutions because you have to buy an electric vehicle, buy a charge point, getting a good electric vehicle tariff, and all of this is separate. How can we consolidate these offerings in easy, turnkey, whole product solutions for consumers? And how could Tencent play a role in that, or can it play a role in that?
yeah, so I think you know, quite a lot of the solutions that will be deployed in making energy transitions may not necessarily be that transparent to the end user. You know, electricity is kind of this commodity resource, you know, flowing electrons, and the user may not know that what used to come from a coal-fired plant is now coming from a wind turbine. They may not know that, and that's part of the game here. But I do think there's a way to actually drive this transition by partnering more and more with electronics companies who are selling to consumers. So, like, I have, everything's so early. I wish there was more products out there, but what I have is quite a lot of concepts that may not end up being very good. But I'll share one with you. You know, ideally, a lot more of these things are tested. But you could have, for example, in many, you know, electronic household devices, everything from you might have hot water heaters, or washer and dryers, or, you know, mentioned electric vehicles. Think of those appliances, you know, refrigerators that use quite a bit of energy. They could all be, they could have chips in them. Like they already have all kinds of electronics in them, but we don't really understand when a refrigerator turns on and off, and when the hot water heater decides to heat up or not. It's kind of doing its own thing. If you could make those devices with a small low-cost chip network aware, according to like a standard approach that all the consumer electronics companies can embrace, they basically put chips in their devices. Now you could have as part of the algorithm, let's say, of when that device works. When does it heat up? When does it wash? When does it dry? It could also be taking information from the energy network over. This is data. You know, this is like the data aspect of the energy provider is communicating, you know, to the appliance. Scheduling. You're basically doing more and more scheduling. So you just, the consumer has an app in their phone. Say, okay, you know, I need these clothes cleaned by 8 in the morning. That's my goal, and I'll put that in. Control it with a nice, easy to read app. And then, you know, what's happening is that you could have more and more a better marriage of supply and demand. You're marrying renewable energy, solar and wind and other sources. If we have base load, that's even better, of course. But you're going to have those peaks and valleys with wind and solar, at least, right? So you want to marry those processes as much as possible to the availability of that energy. And this can be done not only with consumers, but also with industry and the appliances that industry buys. But when you think about consumers, I think if there's a new paradigm of energy efficiency, that's like the headline. The quotes is like, do you want to get a new energy efficient refrigerator? And you can save, tens of euros or hundreds of euros a year or over the lifetime of this appliance by having energy efficiency. And all you need to do is just use the app and you punch 1 or 2 fields and it's done. I was thinking this could actually be a marketing point to the electronics companies who want to sell more things, more appliances. Made it intelligent, you've made it fun, it's network connected. And I think, the goal is really to marry the demand with the supply in a very natural way that doesn't require a lot of control on either side. It can be more automated and it can be done through data and information just by really, I think at the end of the day, sharing when the lowest price energy is available. And if the lowest price energy equals, supply of renewable energy, high supply of it, I think the network could actually balance itself out quite elegantly. That's the thesis, anyways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And from what I understood, I mean, it's a combination really of standardization to offer for consumers also as many possible solutions as possible. Good commercial communication, like you're saying, good marketing, so that the consumer actually understands what potential they have, and then make it automated and as easy as possible to use. And that will probably bring all these solutions that seem to be independent, bring them all together, I suppose. Well, I think our time has come to an end, David. With that thought, really grateful for you joining us and having this chat. It was really interesting to me. I hope it was an inspiring conversation for the audience.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank
you.
And thanks a lot also from my side to David for this inspirational speech. Indeed, I would like to summarize in maybe 5 elements the messages that David gave us. First, identify challenges. It is clear to identify them. Innovate using the technologies that we are already, but test pilot projects. Demonstration projects are going to be extremely useful to and innovate and develop new solutions. Leadership, all kinds of leadership, not just policymakers to drive progress, being very well aware of the challenges that have been identified. And then the last message is that David gave us, let's think about a new paradigm of the energy efficiency concept, which is more looking at a system approach. We were going to talk more about this in today's afternoon session. Thanks a lot, Andres, also for guiding us in this inspirational speech with David. And now, indeed, let's move to the second part of today's today's afternoon, the breakout groups. So indeed, a highly interactive part of today's summit. We are going indeed to divide participants in 3 different breakout groups. Actually, participants were registered, opted for the different breakout groups that will investigate 3 different levers for demand serviceability to emerge. And we have identified 3 of them: targets, modeling scenarios, and revenue streams. And we had different moderators. Thanks a lot to the 6 moderators that will help exchange on some questions to better understand what targets we should have, which modeling scenario we should shape, and also what kind of revenue streams in order to make demand side flexibility and attractive business models. The moderators are Megan Richard, former Director of Energy Policy at the European Commission for the target breakout group discussion. We have two moderators for the modeling scenarios that will go in parallel. Alberto Potocnik, professor of the Florence School of Regulation and the first director of Acer. Laurent Smith, founder and CEO of Digital 4 Grid and previous Secretary General of ENSOE, and then three moderators for the parallel breakout groups on revenue streams. Monique Goyons, Director General of BEUC, the European Consumer Organization. Peter Hermans, former CTO of Stading. And last but not least, Philip Lewis, founder and CEO of the consultancy Bata ETT. Some instruction on how to join the breakout groups. Indeed, on Tame platform, on the left side, you will see the icon breakout groups. So click that icon to join the breakout group that you selected in your registration. In order to have an exchange, indeed, it's important to allow your camera and microphone to be able to indeed to work with this platform. So make sure that you are allowing the team to access your webcam and microphone. And once you are ready, click on the Start Broadcast button to join at the bottom of the screen. Questions can be and the interaction with indeed your moderators can be done lively, but also you can use the question and answer box on the left side of your screen. So this is indeed different opportunities indeed to interact in the breakout groups that we will be divided now for and will take the next hours for this interaction. At the end of these breakout discussions, all the moderators will be back all together on the stage, and we will report as the different discussion and different inputs that they received in all these breakout groups. So I will start. I would launch now this session, and so let's meet here again in 1 hour after these breakout groups. Thanks a lot, and see you later.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They sing on a sleepless night. Try to catch me howling at the moon. 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 When it rains, it pours. Water's up to my chin. Won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach it. Many men have failed. Well, if you wanna get to heaven, you gotta raise a little hell. And I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They say no to sleepless night. Will you find me? Hope you find me. I'll be back home soon. When the sun rises, when the sun We're trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. When it rains, it pours. Water's up to my chin. Won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach it. Many men have failed. Well, if you wanna get to heaven, you gotta raise a little hell. And I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. Facing all the sleepless nights. Will you find me? Hope you find me. I'll be back home soon. When the sun rises, when the sun we're trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. There's dirt on my hands, strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They sing on a sleepless night. Try to catch me howling at the moon. 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 When it rains, it pours. Water's up to my chin. Won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach it. Many men have failed. Well, if you wanna get to heaven, you gotta raise a little hell. And I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They sing on a sleepless night. Will you find me? Hope you find me. I'll be back home soon. When the sun rises, when the sun we're trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They sing on a sleepless night. Try to catch me howling at the moon. 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 When it rains, it pours. Water's up to my chin. Won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach it. Many men have failed. Well, if you wanna get to heaven, you gotta raise a little hell. And I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They say no to sleepless night. Will you find me? Hope you find me. I'll be back home soon. When the sun rises, when the sun we're trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon. We're trying to catch me howling at the moon. 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 When it rains, it pours. Water's up to my chin. Won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach it. Many men have failed. Well, if you wanna get to heaven, you gotta raise a little hell. And I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They say no to sleepless nights. Will you find me? Hope you find me. I'll be back home soon. When the sun rises, when the sun we're trying to catch me howling at the moon. Trying to catch me howling at the moon.
So welcome back to the Smart Energy Summit 2021. We are here back with the moderators of our breakout groups. Unluckily, the one with Megan experienced some technical problems, but indeed we know that indeed we have some materials to report back. So we have indeed all moderators here. I will follow the current order of this slide to allow all moderators to report back on the discussion that you had in the last hour. So I will start with Megan to report us in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, the discussion that you had on targets for DSF, demand-side flexibility. Megan.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Well, as Michael said, unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties. I had a whole series of questions, but we couldn't get through all of them. It was really a question of whether greenhouse gas emission targets alone would be sufficient to allow demand-side flexibility to really help improve system efficiency, etc. And it was clear from the few participants that they didn't think that was an adequate or sufficient target for demand-side flexibility, to improve demand-side flexibility. Most of them said that enabling consumers was a very important element, and this would be really key to getting to demand-side flexibility. But putting a target on individual consumers would be too, I'm going to call it micro, would be too much a burden on individual consumers. But that putting targets, for example, on buildings or other large infrastructure, or perhaps other mechanisms for establishing a target for demand-side flexibility might be useful. And the points that were made over and over again were the importance of system efficiency, system flexibility, making sure that flexible assets were enabled to allow better flexibility and adjust demand according to when demand was greater or less, to make the systems work best. And a last point was made particularly about the importance of collaboration between TSOs and DSOs. So we would have gone into a lot more detail, and there were a lot more other questions to be asked. But I think, Michael, if you don't mind me proposing this, that at some point it would be useful to engage in the conversation and perhaps relaunch the questions so that people come back with them. And then I think you'll have a really good, clear assessment of what people think. That's all from me.
Thanks a lot. Good suggestion, Megan. Just to better understand, what about national targets for DSF?
Well, that was one of my questions, but again, because of the technical problems, we couldn't get to that one. And if it was got to, I couldn't hear the answer. I did put all the questions in the chat, but again, I was even disabled from the chat at one point. So I don't want to raise those aspects, but I think it would be useful to put all the questions to your membership and the participants to allow them to answer in writing, you know, not in huge essays, but just a couple of lines. I think it would be very useful to get an analysis of what the participants thought.
Good, good, good. So let's move then to the reporting on the modeling scenarios, and I would start with Alberto.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yes, we had a bit of a discussion in our breakout. Fortunately, the technology supported us. So why is it so difficult to measure potential? First of all, because we're talking about different animals in different places. There are very many players out there, and for example, one building is different from the other. It's partly a matter of collecting the information which is available, and there was some referring to sensoring at the edge of the grid, or trying to harness the information that retailers already have, but they're not yet brought together. Then there was also a matter of, you know, is the potential an exogenous quantity, or is it somehow endogenous? And there are two dimensions here. One is interoperability. So in a scenario, one would have to have some assumptions about the interoperability of appliances, whether to what extent, and therefore this is also a matter of the time horizon, whether appliances could be linked to provide flexibility. And then one major aspect that we discussed for some time was acceptance and behavior. It's pretty obvious that consumers can provide flexibilities if they are not involved in it, so to speak. It has to be done without affecting their comfort. And on the other hand, there has been some experiments that have shown that consumers are now much more sensitive to sustainability and environmental aspects, and therefore they may react even without a price signal. So this is also difficult. This could be a difficulty in assessing the potential, because the old, the old technical boundaries or the typical behavior, the demand elasticity, the price elasticity of demand doesn't seem to be the only considerations any longer. For sure, the easiest and the safest are electric vehicle charging and behind the meter batteries. So up to 2030, that's probably where we should be looking at in terms of modeling. Beyond that, there is a whole range of new opportunities. Perhaps I think that's probably, oh yes, in terms of value, because there was also one question, how to calculate the value, why is it so difficult? I think the silent majority seems to have converged to look at the avoided cost of distribution network. That seems to be, when it comes to demand side flexibility at small scale consumers, that seems to be the main reference. And because this is the case, when it comes to modeling and when it comes to coming up with a value, probably you have to have a common effort, not only of the institutions or national regulators, but also market players who may have better first-hand knowledge of what's going on with consumers, so that they can better estimate the kind of behavior that I referred to beforehand, the kind of behavior beyond the only economic rationale. That I think is what came out of our breakout session.
Thanks a lot, Alberto. I would be very interested to know the reaction of Monique to what you said before, that consumer might react even without the price signals, but indeed might be indeed for Monique later to reply. Indeed, I would be very curious to know her opinion, and maybe the discussion that she had in her breakout groups already provided a reply to this. The other moderator on the modeling scenarios, Laurent Smith.
Yes, so thank you, Michael. So we did not have much interaction for our session. So we did start from looking on how the modeling is done in the current TYNDP, and I did introduce the recent calculation done in the context of the TYNDP 2020, and that was used as a basis for discussion. So here, this was recognized of the need to have, I would say, a broader sharing of information across the civil society, and particularly within smartEn, on how this modeling is currently done. There was the one participant suggesting to look at the open modeling approach of launched by university around Python, and trying to unblack box all these modeling efforts, so that really they are shared model views across the actors. We agreed that it is important to do this modeling because the people wants to make sure that the right investment is deferred through the use of flexibility, avoid risk of stranded assets, reduce congestion. All that flexibility can be used. One of the questions was whether this is sufficiently accounted for in EU national local modeling here. So here the idea is to work more on bottom-up best practices from some countries, maybe using the smartEn report, observatory report. Also some comments about the need for smartEn to go more into the debate with ENSOE, the new EU DSO entity, and ACER and CER into the modeling, and the limitation with the current model on the prosumer aspect. question on why is it difficult to do that calculation. It's because of the social behavior. I think there was a lot of question on how is the social behavior and the response to dynamic prices. There is also an element of chicken and egg between the technology and the regulation. Which one is anticipating the other, and of course which actors should play a role into this effort of modeling. Again, there was a mention towards the open society, open model with the academic world, and so on. On the methodology itself, the idea is that really the methodology should be transparent. It should be better linked with real-time data, real measurements, real cases. Engage more DSOs and regulators, and not only NSOE. Analyze basically whether the current incentives are right, moving towards TOTEX and rather than CAPEX. Incentive maybe TSO to have better model for demands. And then the idea of doing pilot projects and regulatory sandboxes to really try the behavior and the impact of real-time price down to the users. And was also a small question whether we have sufficiently good enough baselining methods in Europe. We see more and more capacity markets or resource adequacy mechanism. Capacity remuneration mechanism developing in Europe. Do we have the right baselining method? Do we have the right way to consider flexibility into this complex calculation? So these are the points which were discussed.
Very good. Thanks a lot. And then let's move to the revenue streams breakout groups. Monique, I would give you the floor.
Yes, thank you. So we had a group of 13 to 14 people, and we were at a given moment talking among four, but it was a very lively conversation. And I said to them, I promised to them I would speak under their control, and that if possible, they could in the chat say that they disagree with me. This is about democratic reporting. So the first question I asked them is about what do you think that would be the best working model for consumer remuneration? Like, it's a price signal. Huh? So maybe not all consumers, but quite a critical mass of consumers would need a price signal, a reward in one way or the other in order to take on flexibility. And there it was said in a very nice way by one of the colleagues, saying you need triple win strategies. Everybody needs to be able to win out of this new system. And of course, part of that win should be also for the consumer and others for the different other players in the stream. When I then asked the colleagues, because one of the problems is that currently for the consumers, the remuneration models are not very clear. And you should not need a PhD in quantum mathematics to understand how the price is being fixed every 15 minutes. And by the way, I don't have a PhD in quantum mathematics, but I'm a lawyer and I can read contracts quite well since many years. And I have tested those contracts, demand response contracts. It's a headache. You cannot find a clear information about how the price is calculated. Those that I read, and there were quite a few ones. And what has come out of the conversation is that first of all, it's really important to better know your customers, and that also includes that you need to train professionals who are in contact. It's a little bit like what has just been said. It's the market players who know better how consumers act and react, who should be part of the solution in trying to explain this change of mindset, in fact, and of system when it comes to demand response contracts. There was also an optimistic perspective, but I think it is still promising. We said that there will be competition between service providers also on simplicity, because now it is really too complex. It is not workable for people in terms of price information. So the simplicity will be part of the elements on which service providers will have to compete if they want to touch the different segments of consumers. What I also found very interesting is that the colleagues who shared their views said that you still need a lot of convincing in all sectors, policymakers, stakeholders, professionals, industry, households, because flexibility is still a very geeky thing. How can you mainstream it? How can this become mainstream? And there, And that was very interesting, and it's a little bit a response to what Alberto said about not necessarily price signals. It's the gamification, make it fun to be a flexible consumer. And also is this a feeling of belonging to a social community, because you are part of a group that maybe exchanges their electricity. It's this peer-to-peer feeling, or let's say experience, that can be part of the solution when you want to boost take up by consumers, and the whole element of awareness raising of the bigger mass. Then the question that I asked was about how can you mitigate the upfront cost of smart appliances? I mean, I don't speak about, and that's what was said by my colleagues in the breakout session. It's not about the smart fridge. It's about the electric vehicle. It's about the heat pump. Those are upfront costs that even affluent consumers are hesitating to undertake. And there, first of all, the answer was you need public authorities to create a market for those high cost, yes, for households, smart appliances that will make a difference. And second, and that was an interesting idea, I really would like somebody to take that up in a more prominent way, make partnership with other market players. Why not have car sellers or heat pump sellers providing in a much more, let's say, mainstream way, lease contracts to consumers, so that consumers don't need to buy their heat pump, but they just rent it out, and they have still part of the benefits of the flexibility. And by the way, there is for the moment a lot of hype around hydrogen being part of the solution, of the mix, of the energy mix. If that means that people need to change their heating devices or pipes, that will be a headache for people. So please take that into account. It's a huge investment that might not necessarily have the reward that should be done. Last point: what would my colleagues from the breakout session consider to be one of the biggest barriers to shifting to demand response? And what came out is quite unanimously, in different words, shift of mindset. We are still in a market that is dominated by generation, not by consumption. And so it's both the industry, it's a century or more that needs to be habits or tradition that needs to be, let's say, wiped away with another approach. And so this dominating environment needs to really be shifted towards indeed the fact that there is a decentralized energy market. And the second barrier was about inertia in member states in rolling out the new systems, because everybody is watching what the other is going to do in order to see whether it works. So it's like, gazing at each other to see who's going to make the first step. And that, of course, we need somebody who takes the risks and who shows the way forward. That was what my colleagues had shared with me, and I found it a very inspiring conversation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Monique. Very clear. And let's move then to Peter. Peter, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I see it. Thank you very much. Well, we had a small group, I think 12 or 13 people. We tried to work ourselves through the questions. We did not make it completely. The first question we addressed was, are the revenue streams currently for demand side flexibility, are they currently suitable and sufficient? And actually we came out on the point of there is a theory and there's a practice. In theory, the potential is great, what was said. In practice, it's still a difficult journey, because you still have a supply side organized market, and we have to build on top of that market flexibility product. And then is the question, can you sell non-stackable products in a simple way in that type of market? So that was really a point which came out. In the discussion as well came at that point also on the barriers already, the topic of metering and smart meters and metering in general, where we see that the smart meter have been rolled out in a lot of member states in Europe so far, and you see that everybody starts to think about what about the next generation smart meter. So actually there's a potential now. If we go for next generation metering, that we don't do it in the way as we did in the past, and really gear to making the more real-time measurements which are necessary for enabling flexibility, and also more parties active on the consumer side. The second question: what are the the important revenue streams and why. I think the group felt, first of all, it's very simple: shift away load towards the time moments, just to lower cost, because at the end for the consumer it's just that they look to their bill. Then in the second step, as consumers also start to take on board PV panels or batteries, they could start to do more intelligent things, building their own VPP or scheduling type of things, and then maybe start to sell a little bit back to the market on the moment that the prices are high, and buying from the market on the moment that the prices are low. Then the third one is, if in that order, if you're in that type of game, then you might become a serious candidate for the TSO for frequency response services, because you see the volatility there. That could be really worthwhile as a revenue stream. And the fourth one was the flexibility for congestion at the distribution grid. But actually, it was set in that order. We talked a little about the focus of the revenue streams, whether it should focus to the end user or to the parties who enable the flexibilities. And in that respect, we also talked about energy communities, because that is a collective of end users. I think the group felt that an energy community and an aggregator should not be competitors of each other, especially when you have smaller energy communities and you start to do these fancy things on revenue, etc. You really need a sophisticated partner for that, who could enable to bring the flexibility into the system. So that is something to be worked on, and in that partnership, aggregators and communities could work together, because they both have to head up against the incumbent market situation. On the question of whether there are still legislative, administrative, or technical barriers on demand side flexibility, is that enough for attractive business models? There was a very clear statement that it's still for the DSOs, and I recognize that, although as I come from the DSO, that they should leave their wire investment in copper strategies, and that they should go first for a non-wire strategy, and that is especially something which could be emphasized more and more to the regulator. My personal opinion was, from experience, as I say, I fully agree on that. But bear in mind that also the industrial sector still says, well, you just build more copper, otherwise I have a problem when I have to modify my business processes. And then we end up in the topic of the tariffs, because it is also, well, if you continue with building more copper, then who's gonna pay for that? And that is, well, is the residential or the industrial customer paying for that? Should revenue streams, in order to ensure them, should subsidies be introduced or regulated market mechanisms? I think the group was very unanimous on that as well. It is a regulated market mechanism, and don't build on subsidies, because if you have one ministry or one government say, well, today these are the subsidies, and in a 4 years time you might have another government who say, well, we abandoned the subsidies. So that's not a viable business on to run. Then we talked on the emerging changes, such as the growth in electrical vehicles, how that would be impacting revenue streams. Actually, the group said, well, electrical vehicles, well, it's battery on wheels. It's just another asset, so to say, and it brings more capabilities. As I said earlier, when you go to the frequency response services, but it should be, and that was this morning in one of the presentations where somebody said, well, vehicle to grid is still some cumbersome issue and complex issue to deal with. In the group was an opinion that said, well, although that may be the case, this might come sooner as 2013, as was said this morning. So in that respect, vehicle to grid, especially for charging of fleets, etc., could be also a very relevant thing. Although it should be watched out that is not creating problems for the DSOs, as everybody starts to change at the same moment, which then would lead to extra cost for DSOs, which they would incur on tariffs as well. Then on the last question we addressed was, will aggregators remain market parties from the energy sectors, or will other players like the big tech giants like Google and Tesla, Apple, and Microsoft have a role in that? Actually, it was stated that Tesla will be just one of the actors in the market as well. You can say we don't like it, but if the consumer said I like the car, or I buy the car and I use the services, then you just have to deal with that. And we talked a little bit on the privacy issue, because when you go to Google, you don't pay with money, but you pay with your data. How would you then see that with your data privacy when you start to use those type of services, because they know everything while you're driving? There was some difference between the group and myself, because the group said, well, for the end customer at the end, if it's cheap, then we just do it and we give all the data away, and let the regulator come in and say what is allowed and what is not allowed. Because me as a customer, I only go for the cheapest solution. And from the Netherlands, I had a little bit slightly different point of view, because the privacy is a very sensitive issue in the Netherlands. So that is a little bit what the outcome was of what we discussed, and I hope I tried to summarize it as good as possible.
Thanks, Peter. And last but not least, Philip, still on the revenue streams discussion.
And I keep it short, and also because some of the other comments very much complement what we found as well, what we thought as well. First of all, is there enough revenue? Well, I think we all know the answer to that. In some places, sort of. In most places, not yet. And the comment being that not yet, but is not enough to say to players entering the market that there will be, or there might be, or there could be, or there probably will be. There has to be more certainty than that for players to come in. But as yet, generally not yet, especially not at the residential level. And there is, of course, value from load shedding, peak shaving, and especially at local level, for example. But stacking is so critical for this, and the residential value often still requires smart meters. So the value right now, of course, there is value, but not enough. But of course, everyone needs to benefit. And part of the problem is that in order to get this flexibility, everyone does need to benefit: the players, the consumers, the environment. Price signals are needed as part of that. But the thing is that price signals are generally not necessarily suitable for consumers, at least not if they're going to be impactful enough. So price signals are needed, but as we saw in Texas recently, there's a limit to how far you can go with price signals. And also maybe not enough revenue to go around anyway. If you're trying to spread the revenue amongst all these different groups, you end up often running out. So other benefits are needed to incentivize those to take part in that, and whether that includes, and that also needs to be stacked. So that would, of course, include, for example, as we heard in one place, where you get if you've got an EV, you get a rebate off a charger, and that will kind of be enough to incentivize you to join into a program, even though that's not necessarily a big value. Convenience, community value, mobility convenience, health issues for community, and so on. So a lot of other values need to be stacked into that to actually make it sort of motivating. But also, as we said, it's very important that we're not just trying to get flexibility through. Sometimes, for example, companies, it's no good if a company is, or someone is being flexible by turning on a generator, a diesel generator. It has to have a plus for society and the environment at the end of the day. In terms of what's changing, hydrogen, of course, EVs, of course. My own personal view is that batteries follow EVs, not the other way around. If you're buying an EV, you might need a battery if the price signals combine with that, if the incentives combine with that. But many changes needed. When we think of the changes that are needed, first of all, new technologies, as we just mentioned, but also change of mindset, as Monique said. I think we said exactly the same, a shift of mindset. Both from the consumers, from the regulators, from the energy systems, include all parts of the energy system, including the DSOs, TSOs, and that includes more trust sometimes by DSOs, for example, in the ability of flexibility and those that provide flexibility, but also more predictability needed in all of that. And what we've often said is that customers are very apprehensive about paying for flexibility, or rather, how would I say, providing flexibility in a market where all the alternate fossil fuels and so on are being subsidized already. So the idea is that we need to some extent, people are already paying for that. I think the last thing is that to say that the system needs to be more or less, I should say, less generator-centric, more innovative market design, kind of welcoming all technologies and all sizes of and types and shapes of flexibility provision into the market, less of a sort of generator-centric vision to what you have to be, how big you have to be in order to enter that market. So we believe that value is coming. Value is not really there yet, but it is in some places. If a lot of changes happen, if we stack it together and get that change in mindset, then the revenue should be enough to go around. And yeah, that's the view, I think.
Thanks
Great.
a lot, everyone, for this contribution. I don't pretend to summarize whatever you said, but I think that I can summarize in as follows the key messages that were provided. Well, the potential is still untapped. We don't have one levers to make demand side flexibility emerge, but we need a combination of different levers. It's important to have transparency and simplicity. These are extremely clear messages from you. Rewards needs to be also clear. That could be both financial, but not only. I understand that indeed non-financial rewards are also extremely important. We need to involve different actors, play together, create partnership with different parties, shift of mindset, it was repeated twice, and trust. It's another important word that will enable indeed both revenue streams and accurate modeling. And then another important element that was stressed is the system contribution. So the system efficiency contribution to avoid cost, to avoid stranded assets, and then indeed achieve climate neutrality in a cost-effective way. So these are some of the messages that I gathered from all your contribution. Would you agree on this summary? Would you like to complement really? Monique?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I cannot resist to react on something that Peter has said on data, paying with data. Yes, it is true that we pay with data, but indirectly, this also has a price impact. First of all, because those platforms know you so well, they can make personalized pricing, and they can really expand to the highest level your elasticity to pay for certain services. But also, some of these platforms work across sectors, and they can, how do you say, expel their competitors because they can give you exactly what you want at the moment that you want it, and then competition is killed. And then the price impact will be much higher. So don't think that it's only about data. It's already a scandal in itself that the data are being abused, but then there is also a price impact. I really need to say that. Thank you.
Yeah, just to comment what Monique said, therefore it's very important to follow what the European Commission is doing on the EU data strategy, because they want to limit those tech giants a little bit to make the game more fair in Europe, and that the welfare is spread out and not only monetized by the platform companies themselves.
Exactly. Any other comments? Laurent, on these data issues, would you like to comment?
Yes, sorry, I was muted. So I fully agree with I think what has been said is it has to be a thought from a prosumer-centric point of view, and making sure I think the approach is consistent with the European strategy in terms of digital approach, and then basically give the power to the consumer to decide what is the best option, the simplest option, and interact with the system in avoiding basically unnecessary investments or finding way to incorporate more renewable without a massive grid reinvestment sometimes. So I think this is the balance. Maybe one element which we did not touch too much is the unbalanced situation which exists between grid operator and the actors at the edge in terms of data and methodologies and so on. And so there is really a question on how to make sure this data modeling is well shared with regulator and with actors so that we can take advantage of that forward-looking vision, including flexibility. So that's something which is some work for you, I think, Michael, in smartEn, to think how to further interact into this discussion.
Exactly. Philip, would you like to? No, sorry, Alberto.
No, just a brief comment to what Laurent was saying, because it was briefly touched in our breakout session. It seems that the situation in terms of data availability is very different between different member states. Who has the right data? And it's the DSO, DNO. Is it the retailer? Other parties? So I think here, it's a more holistic approach. Indeed, smartEn could play a role in at least to identify which data is available, which data can be brought in, and who has it. Because apparently, this is different in different parts of Europe.
Exactly. Data access, ownership, portability are extremely important for demand-side flexibility. Indeed, exactly. And the work that is coming up, indeed, from the Commission on the Data Access Implementing Act, cybersecurity, and e-privacy, and so on, are going to indeed impact the business models related to demand-side flexibility. And indeed, as smartEn, we are going to have a close look at all these elements. Megan, yes, happy to give you the floor.
Thanks. I just wanted to add one point, which we didn't have a chance to discuss in the chat, and that is what I think is the importance of regulatory pull for innovation and change. So the fact of establishing targets, and of course, how and where and when and under what circumstances is really the question. But establishing targets has been proven in many cases to allow and push and pull innovation and bring new technologies online in order to meet those targets. So I just wanted to make that point, which, of course, because we didn't have a chance to go into all the details in our group, I think that basic principle is really very important. So somewhere along the line, we should try to push this. And then as you and your members and the other groups identify exactly where and how that should be applied, I just wanted to reiterate that particular point.
Perfect, Megan. And this statement is the perfect link between the inspirational speech of David and the next session that is coming up with you policymakers from the European Commission and the MEP. And we are indeed going to talk about the regulatory push and pull for demand side stability. So it's the perfect conclusion for this session. Thanks a lot to all moderators for your work, both in your breakout groups and this collective reporting of the discussion. Thanks a lot. And now a few seconds break to move indeed to the next session with Commission and Parliament representative. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Ciao.
So welcome back to the last session of today's Smart Energy Summit, and I'm really happy to be here with two new policymakers from the Commission and from the European Parliament. We have here indeed, as you can see, Hiro Ailio, Head of Unit of DG Energy B1 from the European Commission, working on local initiatives, communities, and the just transition. Hello, Hiro, and thanks for joining us. And then also we have a representative from the European Parliament, Nicolas González Casares, member of the European Parliament from the Socialist Group, working on in ITRE Committee, so the Industry and Energy Committee of the European Commission, a relevant person for discussions on the climate law and also the energy system integration strategy. Thanks, first of all, for your work that you have done in the last months and the good push for demand side flexibility and the role of indeed active customer participation in this policy framework. So we have indeed this conversation with you on the role of active energy consumers in the clean energy transition. And I would like indeed to start with a question. Taking inspiration from what President von der Leyen said in her first State of the Union speech. She said that the European Green Deal is much more than cutting CO2 emission. It's about making systemic modernization across our economy, society, and industry. A powerful message. What's your interpretation of this message, and how do you see this message to be implemented? I will start with Hiro.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, and good afternoon, all participants to this event. It's a pleasure to be here. I truly enjoy this topic, so that's adds to that feeling. So to your question, it's a big question, of course, an interpretation challenge for me. I would see two things here. I would look at it from the macro level. So what would be the kind of like a macro interpretation of this? So I think they're clearly the President von der Leyen. So she's talking about the Green Deal as this growth strategy to bring indeed society, economy, and industry to a sort of a greener and more sustainable future, and that type of a path. And the logic is that Europe here will not only be thinking about, but actually doing something about these inconvenient truths that our economy is actually built on a pretty false cost-benefit analysis currently, and that we have to change. So that means then that we need to sort of break free from this fossil fuel-driven economy and society, and the one that's following this kind of linear consumption patterns, and then where energy, consumers actually remain passive. So away from this, plus then fossil fuel imports, and then towards what? Well, towards this kind of a sustainable circular economy, which is going to be powered by renewable energy, and then where system integration, and then the critical mass of active consumers are in the center of this. And when we say consumers, so there I mean individuals, but also businesses and industries. So it's all of those. And then also one part of this is having investors taking a different type of a role, so demanding much more climate risk and environmental risk disclosures. So that's also part of this change. And then what we would see here is that cities and regions are getting much more involved in addition to the central governments, and you have digital and of course demand side solutions which are coming in big time in the energy sector. So contrasting with the old situation where you had the supply side and, let's say, transport side of energy, which were in the central policy making. Now we have much more the demand side. And if we look at then, what concerns more the work and the issues discussed in this event today. So there's the systemic aspect, and this is more on the micro side. So here we're really looking at the need to integrate the energy system so that we can support faster electrification, and then also the obvious thing, integrating those renewable and low carbon fuels, such as hydrogen, to those sectors which we cannot very easily decarbonize otherwise. And
good.
Those are the kind of points which I would put on the table here.
Good. Nicolas.
Hello. First, let me say thank you to Smart Energy Europe for the invitation to participate in this Smart Energy Summit. And of course, to all the people that are watching us now. Thank you to everybody. Today, energy remains at the center of the political activity to face the challenge of the EU. And I think I agree with Hiro when he said that von der Leyen wanted to say that we are in a paradigm shift or a new growth strategy, as Franz Timmermans used to say. I think that European Green Deal is our path to modernize our economy in a fair, healthier, and more affordable way. Also to fight against one of the main challenges of our time, the climate change. It is also a competitive opportunity because we know that there is no alternative to decarbonization. Now, of course, we are fighting against the COVID-19 crisis, and the UNEP emission gas report 2020 finds that despite the brief dip in carbon CO2 emission caused by COVID-19 crisis, the world is still in the path to rise more than 3 Celsius degrees this century, far beyond the Paris Agreement. However, the report also concludes that a low carbon pandemic recovery could cut 25% of the greenhouse emissions expected in 2030. The tool and policies to recover the economy must focus in climate neutral solutions. The recovery plan must be green, accelerating the EU Green Deal path. A large jump in emissions has generally accompanied recoveries from previous global economic crises. We cannot allow this now. I think with the energy system sector integration strategy to coordinate all sectors, including those more difficult to decarbonize. Here, not only production sector must be coordinated, the demand side shall play an important and active role. It is also, as I said before, an industrial opportunity. We saw how painful it is to depend on material and supply chains and now have from third countries. We have realized that key supply chains are necessary here in the EU. The energy transition also needs to incorporate a reinforcement of European value chains. Our energy system must move from a centralized system where only the production, transport, and distribution are managed towards a decentralized system where consumers have an active role to manage their consumption, store, produce, or sell surplus, thanks to digitalization and new rights agreed.
Thanks a lot. Indeed, clear messages from both your side that indeed the more relevance should be given to the demand side. So indeed, in coherence with what said before in the previous session, really a shift of mindset from a generation focus to a demand side flexible contribution. And indeed, we hope that this is going to be a key element of the forthcoming Fit for 55 package that is coming up. What are your expectations of this package? Let's start indeed with the Commission that is indeed brainstorming and currently drafting their proposal. If you can anticipate something on the preparation on this package, Hiro.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, this package is indeed very much in the making. It's got a bit over 10 pieces of legislation which are being looked at, and the logic, of course, being that we would adjust them so that they will deliver on the 55% target instead of the current 40% target, which is there. So there's a very clear logic there. And of course, since Nikolai is on the call, so we have to remember that the Parliament's line on this is 60%, I believe, but that will certainly come clear later. So this package is covering various sectors. So we have climate, we have energy, we have mobility, we have competition, and those sectors which are in it. And if I look at the energy side, so there's some of the sort of key pieces of law are the Energy Efficiency Directive and Renewable Energy Directive, and we have the energy performance of buildings, and we potentially have also a tuning of the governance regulation in that context. So where are we here? So we are actually at the very advanced stages of the impact assessment on the energy efficiency and the renewable side in particularly. So those are there, and they are based on public consultations which have been finalized earlier this year, and the sort of timeline of this overall of the Fit for 55 is June this year, so that by that time we would have documents ready.
Nikolai,
there are also climate and transport parts there, but I will not go to those, so we save some time.
Yeah. And Nikolai, what's your expectation from the Commission in this sense?
Well, the negotiations for the climate law are ongoing now, where the 2030 emissions reduction target must be set. I like to remember our 60% position from the Parliament, of course. I think it's a huge and necessary package that needs a considerable ambition. 3 years ago, the Clean Energy Package raised the EU climate ambition and modernized our energy and climate policy. After evaluating the national energy and climate plans, we know that we are far away from the Paris Agreement path set before. We have seen in the Commission's 2030 climate target plan the numbers of renewables and energy efficiency necessary in 2030 to reach the 50% goal. From 30 to 40 share of renewable energies, at least 36 to 37 improvement in energy efficiency. So the measures, tools, the proposals to update the EU energy and climate ambition must include all sectors, careers, and of course, consumers as active players. I think the climate law is the origin of this Fit for 55 package proposal. In my opinion, the Parliament agreed on a strong position, not only for calling for this 60% target, but also for proposing tools and procedures to guide the Union towards the climate neutrality. The strategies that we are negotiating now, the energy system integration, hydrogen strategy, offshore wind, strategy, carbon border adjustment. Yesterday, we have the resolution of the Parliament, also allow us to define the Parliament priorities. There are agreements that the Commission should take into account in their proposal: the role of natural gas, transitional, low carbon fuels, the types of hydrogen. I hope at least more than they have taken into account our proposal of 60% in the name of the 55% package. Of course, I hope that.
Yeah, indeed. Well, both of you mentioned indeed efficiency, energy efficiency, and the revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive. But until now, indeed, energy efficiency has a static connotation. We would really are pushing for an evolution of this concept to a dynamic, time-dependent and system-wide concept of energy efficiency in line with the energy system integration strategy. That's why also the title of this session is System Efficiency First, the role of active energy consumers to contribute to this efficiency of the systems. How far or how close are we to this evolution? Can we expect that the Energy Efficiency Directive is going to embrace this new perspective and system approach?
Shall I start or?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, look, Michael, what I would say that I would claim that we left that connotation already with the Clean Energy for All Europeans package, and I believe that Murray Donnelly, who was there speaking earlier, would probably agree as well. So indeed, efficiency is very much time dependent. So it's not only about absolute savings, and that's why we were pushing for demand response, the smart metering mandate. We have dynamic electricity contracts and all rights to consumers in those already in the electricity directive, but also in the EED there were steps taken. So that's there since now 2 months in force. So and I think there's a logic to this, and I always come back to my 88-year-old mom who lives in Helsinki and in a country with smart metering and with dynamic tariffs and all these services. And then I look at her situation and my situation here in Brussels, where I have my sort of 1940s technology analog meter in the cellar. And I just wonder that why the DSO tariffs are so high in Brussels, and how come, my mom, how happy she was when I told her that go for the dynamic tariff. Philip Lewis will also say the same thing. And then she calls me back 6 months later and said, wow, this was great. The savings I'm making were in the hundreds of euros in the case of her house. So, with that, I could even almost buy a monopoly priced Finnair flight back to Helsinki from Brussels once those flights again start. So there we are, but we need to do a lot of advertising and awareness raising to get this going.
Okay, I think that within the energy and climate policies, energy efficiency is a fundamental pillar. European legislation must consider the energy efficiency first principle. Energy savings are the easiest way to save money for our citizens and also for our industries by the time that we improve our energy competitiveness. Energy efficiency measures are economically profitable. They make it possible to combat energy poverty, and also they are measures that promote local employment with the renovation of buildings, for example. Some policies are needed to enable it. We have a goal of 20% energy efficiency for each year, but it seems that we won't meet it. COVID-19 will have an impact here to decrease energy consumption, but a rebound effect is expected, as I said before. That is why it's essential to take advantage of recovery strategies and associated funds to avoid this rebound effect while the economy recovers. I think also that the clean energy package gave an important step in consumer empowerment, putting them in the center. I think that the RED II and the new electricity market design establish the right to self-consumption, avoid unjustified charges like the sun tax, for example, in Spain, the right to make full use of the advantage of aggregation of production and supply, this possibility of creating energy communities to advance energy efficiency at the household level. It helps fight energy poverty too. So we must ensure now the full implementation of the clean energy package provisions to unlock the active demand response and the consumer potential in this integrated renewable energy system to generate, consume, store, and sell energy. I also welcome the Commissioner Simpson announcement on demand side flexibility with a set of new provisions. And I think also the road transport electrification can create opportunities. Digital solutions and rules are needed on electric mobility charging or storage. We have to discuss about it. In my opinion, the outcome must make the energy system as efficient and competitive as possible, taking advantage of the full potential of the demand side distributed renewable resources. I think that digitalization here is key to unlocking this potential.
Thanks a lot. Time is really flying. We are arriving to the end of our half an hour. And indeed, I would like to conclude with one question. Today's summit, we discussed about the different levers for demand side flexibility to emerge, targets, accurate modeling scenario, and revenue streams for demand side flexibility to emerge. I would like to have your opinion on specifically the target. We as smartEn, we are pushing within the revision of the Renewables Directive for a specific demand side flexibility target of 10%, meaning at national level, meaning that member states should avoid by 10% their peak demand by unlocking distributed flexibility. This will be a way to help integrate more valuable renewables in the different end user sectors. What's your opinion on that?
On the levers and on the targets particularly, so this is, I mean, there are pros and cons to that. The targets have their merits clearly, and I think we've tested that at the sort of higher level. All these greenhouse gas targets and so on, energy efficiency and so on. What we know though, that once you start sort of increasing the numbers of different sectoral targets, so then this accounting gets a bit complicated, and you know, it just gets difficult to follow. And then on this one, so how should I say it? I think the objective that you're setting there is very valid, and I would love to see that 10% happen as well. But when I talk to our modelers, so what they say, sorry, is that it's difficult to achieve this without then starting to play with the market rules. And what we rather prefer is to create this kind of a positive market environment that will facilitate the uptake of demand side flexibility, and and so that we can incentivize also DSOs and TSOs to procure that flexibility service. So we are more looking into the market side than the target side on this. I think this is the way we think currently. So we would need to be maybe a bit more, let's say, convinced on this still. And of course, interested to hear.
We are going to work, because we don't want to have modelers to impose and to dictate some political decisions that will be very relevant to actually give visibility to demand side flexibility and the business models to emerge. And that's why we need all levers to be equally compatible. So not just focus on one element, but all the integration of all of them. Nicola, what's your opinion on this target for demand side flexibility?
For myself, the most important for the development of a transition like this is regulatory security and certainty, and also that the energy system has correct price signals, breaking down non-economic barriers that prevent users from benefiting from the cost-effective possibilities of participation in the system. Of course, I'm not absolutely very in favor here of setting goals. I believe that the demand side flexibility can optimize the energy system and help the penetration of renewables ahead of other options. The studies and reports highlight the potential of active consumers. I think that the new electricity market design has stimulated the development of self-consumption. But however, let's wait for the impact assessment of the Commission's and the proposals, maybe there is room for a target to stimulate the infrastructure needed.
Thanks a lot. We are indeed in the early phases of this discussion on the Fit for 55 package. There will be plenty of opportunity to indeed keep discussing and valorizing the role of distributed flexibility in line with an ambitious and correct implementation of the electricity market design, as you, Nicolas, said, because the work in that sense still needs to be completed. We are far from a full implementation of the clean package for all Europeans package of the previous legislator. So a combination of the two, it's an essential effort. Thanks to both of you for engaging in this interview discussion. I'm happy indeed to hand over to our chair, Andreas Flam from Intelios, for the conclusion of our summit. Thanks a lot from my side for your participation at our Smart Energy Summit. Now, indeed, few seconds to introduce the bumper and then the words to Andreas for the concluding remarks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you again, Mikael. I'm very happy to say a few concluding remarks to this exciting Smart Energy Summit today, and also to pick out a few messages that stuck out to me that I think are worth summarizing. I think throughout the day, a clear message emerged. We cannot achieve climate neutrality in Europe in a cost-effective way without active customer engagement. The business community gathered today gave a strong signal that demand-side flexibility must emerge as a key enabler to this clean energy transition. And I was very glad to hear from Acer Director Christian Singlerson that he anticipates that Acer will put more attention towards consumer involvement in the next 10 years than it might have done in the previous 10 years. We had business speakers that inspired us with their projected visions of 2030, where a reality will be that buildings and industries and vehicles interact in a more variable energy system. And we heard some relevant quantifications on the benefits for all end users, for companies, and for the system as a whole. So I'm confident that this vision will also resonate with the Commission to inspire the forthcoming Fit for 55 package proposal. We heard from David Wallerstein that what we need really is now leadership and innovation with new solutions in the new energy sector, but also using existing technologies and testing them in pilots, and also ensuring that supporting funds from EU and also national level also reach the startup community. I want to thank all participants for the exchange in the breakout groups, which discussed the three levers for demand-side flexibility to emerge: targets, modeling scenarios, and revenue streams. And I think some of the few highlights from the breakout groups were that from a consumer viewpoint, flexibility must not impact on the comfort level, and revenue streams from providing flexibility must be sufficient and it must be worthwhile for consumers to participate. Also, transparency and simplicity are needed. And we in the breakout group, some comfort was given by the fact that competition will or between service providers will help with that goal. From a system viewpoint, it will be important to incentivize system operators towards more of a TOTEX instead of a CapEx approach to ensure that smart solutions are also taken into account for system management. And maybe most importantly from the breakout groups was the message that we all need a change in mindset in terms of including the consumer perspective or into policy making and into all services and products from the market, and to shift a little bit more away from the supply side towards the consumption side. Overall, I think we all agreed the potential for demand-side flexibility is huge and it's largely untapped. Therefore, all levers will be needed. And within smartEn, we think that in particular, an overall demand-side flexibility target at all member states of 10% of peak demand, while being way below the real potential, will still give a political and market push and kickstart demand-side flexibility. As we discussed today, this kind of regulatory push has also proven to be successful in other areas. From the last discussion, the policy discussion, we heard that the change in the energy sector and the shift in attention towards the demand side has also been acknowledged there. That is very much appreciated from the smartEn community. Also, there was a sympathy for the 10% goal that I just mentioned, whilst at the same time, the focus is more on the improving the market rules, which from my perspective is of course a prerequisite to even reach the 10% goal, and therefore also very important, and it can be both measures can be necessary. Now we get to the end. I would like to thank the keynote speaker, Christian Signersen, for his support and his keynote at the beginning of this event. I want to thank the inspirational speaker, David Wallerstein. I want to thank the moderators of the breakout groups, Monique Goyons, Megan Richards, Alberto Potocznik, Laurent Schmidt, Peter Hermans, and Philip Lewis. And I would, of course, want to also thank a lot the policymakers in the panel discussion, policy panel discussion, Iro Ailio and Nicola Gonzalez Casares. And of course, once again, also a big thank you to the sponsors of this event, AMX, Eaton, NLX, EPQ, EVBox, Siemens, and Wattstadt. And last but not least, I want to thank a lot the smartEn team around its new executive director, Michael Willer, for giving us this very well organized and orchestrated event with lots of fruitful exchanges. I hope you all gained new insights and perspectives today. I certainly did. And I look forward, and the smartEn community as a whole looks forward to exchange and work together with all of you to push ahead this energy transition with the energy consumer at its heart. So thank you all very much. I hope we can all soon meet again in person. But for now, I wish you all a good evening and goodbye.
Strong like a tree, there's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They sing on a sleepless night. Try to catch me howling at the moon. Won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach it, many men have failed. Well, if you wanna get to heaven, you gotta raise a little hell. And I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. Will you find me? Hope you find me. I'll be back home soon. When the sun